Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back again to take you through the bosses and then the trash of Magister's Terrace, and of course reminding you guys to like and subscribe if you're enjoying these guides. The first boss of Magister's Terrace is the Arcanotron, which starts with a repulsing slam tank knockback, which tanks are always going to want to make sure that they're near the walls just to deal with these knockbacks, because there's also going to be another one called Arcane Expulsion, which is knocking back the entire party and leaving a pool of residue on the ground. You also are going to be having your players afflicted by Ethereal Shackles, which is a dispellable root, and players can also use Tiger's Lust, Disengage, things like that to get out of the roots and reduce some of their damage taken. Not only do tanks want to have the boss near the wall to deal with the knockbacks, but also for the refueling protocol. Whenever the boss runs out of energy, it tries to refuel and soaks up orbs from around the room. By keeping it near the wall, this prevents orbs from spawning at 360 possible degrees, and instead focuses them into a couple of different lanes, which is very important because when you soak up these orbs, then you're gonna also be leaving behind arcane residue. And so you want it to be in like more narrow lanes so you can have some more space around the room. And also, if any orbs hit the boss during the refueling protocol, they deal massive damage to the party. The second boss is Seranel's Sunlash, who is putting down a suppression zone, which is silencing players whenever they step into it. But you are going to need this suppression zone for the runic marks that the boss puts out onto 2 players at a time. This is going to be dealing consistent ticking damage to those players, and you are able to remove it by stepping into that suppression zone. But also, you are unleashing a big burst of AoE damage on the entire party, and a debuff, which is slowing players. You want to make sure that you are spacing out the explosions of these runic marks so you can drop that slow debuff and make sure that you're not having anybody getting huge amounts of extra damage taken. What I like to do is I like to ping one player to let them know that they're up first to go clear and walk into that suppression zone. It is always a nice tool just to make sure that everybody knows who's going to go first, because you want to go immediately. The boss will also be casting a Wave of Silence, where every player is going to need to jump into this suppression field to avoid the attack, and if you fail to do so, then you'll be silenced for 8 seconds. Tanks also have to watch out for the boss's Hastening Ward. You can hear this by the voice line,
"I am unyielding,"
where the boss is just surrounding himself with a dispellable or purgeable magic effect, increasing his attack speed and causing his attacks to deal additional damage. So if you have a purge available for you, make sure you're utilizing it on this Hastening Ward on the boss, listening in for that voice line,
"Unyielding."
And if you're a tank and there is no purge coming, make sure you have a defensive at the ready. The third boss is Gemellus, which is a large squid, and it's going to be casting multiple rounds of Triplicate, spawning 2 extra versions of itself. So at first it starts off as 1, it quickly turns into 3 squids, and then it turns into 5 squids. So all of these are going to be sharing health, so multi-dollars, extra cleave, the tank will want to make sure he's always moving around towards some of the other little baby squids for better cleave damage, is all going to be incredibly important. Players will be marked by a neural link, where they're going to have an arrow on their character, and there's also going to be a big red shroud that surrounds the minion that you are paired with on the neural link. All of your squids are building up shields on themselves, and the only way to remove those shields is for the neural linked player to go to their targeted boss, and once they do, it'll remove that absorb, and you can keep on DPSing those squids down. Depending on how many squids are out, Astral Grasp is going to be dragging players towards those squids. So at the beginning of the fight, you'll have 3 squids. Later on in the fight, you'll have 5. And so depending on that number, that's how many players are going to be getting dragged towards those squids. These squids have very large void zones around their body, so make sure you're not getting dragged into them. That same principle applies for the Cosmic Sting, where depending on how many squids are out, that'll determine how many dots are applied to players. This is not only going to be a high damage over time effect, putting out onto 3 or 5 members of your party, but it also is dropping void zones. And since you have the Astral Grasps later on that could potentially drag players through these void zones, the best thing to do is make sure you pop a defensive, move to the edges of the room before the Cosmic Sting goes out, drop off those void zones there so they won't bite you back later on the Astral Grasps. The final boss is Degentrius, which is casting Void Torrents, which break the room into 4 slices. So we usually have the tank in their own slice, a healer and a melee DPS in another, and then 2 other players spread out into the rest of the 2 slices. From here, you're going to have to make sure you soak the unstable Void Essence that the boss casts, which is kind of like a volleyball, where it jumps from one pie slice to another and needs to be soaked every single time. If you miss a soak, it'll likely wipe your party at a higher key level. While you need to make sure you soak these, the boss is also casting Devouring Entropy onto players, which causes them to take ticking damage, and these debuffs expire at different times. When they do expire, the player is going to emit entropy orbs that, if they make contact with another player, will slow them by 70%. So having access to Freedom, Tiger's Lust, any snare removals, if you accidentally get hit, can be incredibly helpful. And of course, making sure that you don't get hit is always a first priority. This is going to result in really heavy ticking damage onto your party, especially when players are soaking the unstable Void Essence, so don't be afraid to make sure you're using defensives about on cooldown whenever you receive the Devouring Entropy, and know that you need to soak one of the unstable Void Essences very soon. This is kind of a more free-form fight for utilizing your defensives, so you want to make sure you're using them constantly. The tank, on the other hand, is going to be in their own quadrant, where they will be soaking Hulking Fragments, which are a large circle that the boss smashes into the tank, so you want to make sure no other players are within that region. And when the tank is dispelled, they're going to be dropping some Stygian Ichor Puddles, so the tank will be able to move out of melee range, get to the back of the room, get dispelled, and then get back into melee to continue DPSing the boss. If your tanks are very confident, we had times in beta where we built this up to like multiple stacks. In general, just make sure that you're not clogging up melee range for your tank so he can sit there and return and DPS freely. When it comes to trash, there's a few especially deadly pulls that I want to highlight. Right before you encounter Arcanotron, you'll be fighting up against a Blazing Pyromancer that is going to be casting not only a Pyroblast that needs to be interrupted, but also casting Ignition, which is going to be stacking up ticking damage onto your entire party. This is a great area to be activating some personal defensives, especially because you have spell-woven familiars that are these just small blueberries that are going to jump out onto your allies and deal some additional burst damage. This can make it incredibly deadly when paired up with the ignitions, as they splash and do a lot of AoE, so players want to make sure that they're spread out. And you also have to deal with the Lightward healers and the Arcane Magisters and the extra kicks that they are producing as well. You are going to have to deal with some of the extra bolts and some polymorph casts that need to constantly be interrupted, while also dealing with a couple of personal dispels from some of the dots. When you enter the hallway headed towards Seranel Sunlash, you're also going to have to deal with a number of different mobs that are producing a lot of group damage. You have to deal with runed spellbreakers that are going to be casting runic glaives out onto your allies, debuffing 2 of them at a time and stacking up magic damage. You also need to make sure you're watching out for magic dispels onto your allies coming from the Lightward healers and the Magisters. As you approach Gemellus, you're going to have the boss room with 2 different large blueberry mini-bosses and a number of Void Terrors. These Void Terrors are casting Terror Wave, which, if the cast completes, is going to fear the entire party, so make sure you're watching for these mobs. You also have to watch out for the Shadow Rift Void Caller on the left side in Gemellus' room. This mob is going to be casting a huge amount of AoE damage periodically, and so while you're dealing with any of the casters that are still alive, the Void Caller is also going to be putting out ticking damage. The other blueberry you have to watch out for is the Devouring Tyrant, which is constantly putting up massive negative healing absorbs onto your tank, while also debuffing another member of your party with a smaller negative healing absorb as well. This debuff is going to be counting down for about 5 seconds before it explodes, and if you're standing near any other players, it will put a negative healing absorb on them as well. One quick tip, if you have a Warlock in your group, you can also use the Warlock Gateway to skip around the Shadow Rift Void Caller and Devouring Tyrant that are guarding the bridge on the way to Degentrius. You can also take advantage of some Night Elf Shadow Meld skips and some extra movement, perhaps even utilizing like a Hunter's Feign Death and Turtle to make sure you get around these mobs. It's really nice if you're able to do so, as fighting the huge AoE damage of the Void Caller and big tank damage of the Devouring Tyrant can be especially deadly. So that's what we got so far for our guides for Magister's Terrace. Hopefully you guys found it helpful. And if you're looking for some extra route advice and extra tips, be sure to check out Shah IRL's channel, as we have linked in the description down below a whole bunch of the routes that he is working on for this season. Thanks so much for watching, and huge love to our patrons for making all this content possible. If you'd like to join them and check out some of the extra benefits that we have, it'll be linked in the description below as well. Thanks for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch you all next time.